When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Tonight, Period of Adjustment, Fall 1946. Here are Linda Ellerbee and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
And practice adjusting the controls a little. Where we're going tonight, adjustment is imperative.
Welcome to autumn 1946. During the war, Americans told each other there's no place like home. Now they add, including home. What's going on here? If the economy's nearly doubled in 6 years, why can't you find a decent steak anywhere? Why is the government playing Buck Rogers with one bunch of Germans while it tries to hang another bunch? And another thing, just where did all these babies come from? Come election day, somebody around here better have some answers.
At the end of World War II, there were about 12 million men and women in the U.S. Armed Forces. By the fall of 1946, little more than a year later, 10 million of them were civilians again. We had adjusted to life without them, and they to life without us. Now, it was time to readjust, but not go back.
Blue sky, smiling at me, nothing but blue sky do I see.
Home again. Peace had put an end to 4 years of war, as war had put an end to 10 years of depression. But if you saw nothing but blue skies, then you saw the world in black and white, and you were in for a surprise. The Best Years of Our Lives, the movie that came closest to telling the truth about people getting back to normal. It starred Dana Andrews, Frederick March, and an unknown named Harold Russell.
But it talked about the realism. And what happened to three guys who came home? What happened to those three people when they came home? In a sense, answered the question of what happened to 17 million who came back.
Harold Russell was not an actor playing a sailor who lost his hands. Harold Russell was a soldier who lost his hands when they were blown off on D-Day in North Carolina by accident. Diary of a Sergeant, a training film made by the Army. In it, the camera followed Harold Russell as he learned to use his hooks. Russell said nothing in the film and said it loud enough to be heard, even in Hollywood.
William Wyler wanted to produce a picture that was real, that people could look at and believe in and understand and know. And I think he did everything so real. In those days, black and white was real. That's how the world was, and that was how you told a story. You didn't color it up. I think that was the difference. Pictures before that, for the most part, didn't really deal with realism as Best Years of Our Lives did. The problems they had of readjusting. A kid coming home without any hands, how is he going to deal with his childhood sweetheart? You know, this kind of thing. The Air Force guy, Dana, he had a problem because he'd married this Flossie before he went overseas, and she felt cheated that he'd married this glamorous flyboy. Came back, he couldn't get a job even as a soldier. Frederick Marsh, the sergeant, he'd been a grunt. He'd climbed the mountains and fought the enemy face to face. And he came back now to adjust to a life of a banker. You know, he was going to be vice president of a bank. And he couldn't understand it. This is crazy. So that in any way, there was a different kind of adjustment. Everybody had this adjustment to make, just as they had an adjustment to make when they went in the service. That was a different kind of a life. Different kind of a life entirely.
For more than 1 million veterans, the different kind of life was college on the GI Bill, now in its second year. 800,000 vets were enrolled in colleges in the fall of 1946. Another 250,000 couldn't get on to the bulging campuses and had to wait for a year. At Indiana University in Bloomington, enrollment more than doubled in 1 year. Former Army Sergeant Frank Jones was a sophomore.
The younger students on the campus right out of high school, I know one thing they couldn't understand is how we realized how lucky we were to get home. Everybody had friends and people they knew that didn't get home. I served and came up through New Guinea and the Philippines, and I saw war as war it really is. It's hell. I was in my office, in the office where I was working at the time as an undergraduate student, and this Japanese student came in, and he shook me up. I couldn't, it took me a minute to realize why I was so shook up by recognizing here's a Japanese young guy, and hell, he was a student just like I was. But that's something that I'll never forget, and it happened.
Student housing, even classrooms, were makeshift, temporary, and uncomfortable. No ivy-covered walls here. There were 2 million students on college campuses that fall. 40% of them were ex-GIs, getting $65 a month if they were single, $90 if they were married, plus free tuition. And they were serious. The ex-GIs did not wear freshman beanies or swallow goldfish. They studied. A college education was something that many, if not most of them, could not have afforded, and they weren't about to blow their chance. There was a sense of urgency of getting on with their lives. They married, they had children. Sometimes, to supplement their GI allotment, they worked. Their spouses worked. For married students, college was no honeymoon.
Prior to World War II, there weren't very many married undergraduate students, and you just didn't know whether you could make it. The GI Bill helped, but you had to work too.
Frank and Jerry Jones were married in 1944.
We had $90 a month. Our rent was $25. But that included everything. I mean, to go get the, what did we burn, kerosene?
Yeah.
Something that explodes, I know.
Kerosene.
We ate a lot of Spam.
Yeah.
Got to be a tradition in our family.
She knows how to make Spam 10 or 12 different ways. As I arrived here, it was kind of a shock because from the point of view of seeing the size of the trailer that we had rented. You know, when you come to a little trailer where there's no running water and there's a gravel sidewalks, and you look over at your mother-in-law who's looking down at you kind of like, my God, you don't think my daughter's going to live here, do you?
Plus, everybody was in the same situation. And so it all was kind of a joke. I mean, oh, did you blow up your stove today? Or did you empty the sink and forget that there wasn't any pipes? It just ran out on the floor.
And here I'm married and got a little boy, and that little boy acted like most babies. He didn't act like he should all the time. And it was a double adjustment that we all had to make. But maybe that was easier in the situation where we were in, where we had all veterans around us.
Not all vets were married, and not all students were vets. She's a girl. His girl. He may have been born too late to go to war. It was just in time to take advantage of supply and demand, and a varsity sweater. The thing shouts, big man on campus. Or it did, until the shouting was reduced to a pipsqueak by this, the bomber jacket. Doesn't shout, doesn't have to. And you don't get it playing ball games. Now you don't get her playing ball games either, right? Come back to the fall of 1946.
Our world will continue with a period of adjustment, fall 1946.
Humor helps you deal with life's unexpected possibilities, and so does MasterCard. If you lose it, which I did, they replace it. Thank you. And thank you, MasterCard. MasterCard, master the possibilities.
One rockin' evening at the Silver Bullet.
This band sure is loud.
Oh, thanks, I just bought it.
Want to dance?
No, they have Coors Light.
You can't hear me, can you? I think you're beautiful. In fact, I think you look so hot in here, isn't it? Of course, it's not so much the heat as it is the humidity.
There's no slowing down at the Silver Bullet tonight. Pardon me, folks. How do you like your new Ford Aerostar?
Oh, it's great.
Think you can tell me about it in less than 30 seconds?
Well, it does so many things. We take the kids to school.
We go to the drive-in movie.
We tow the boat.
And the dirt bikes.
We brought the new table home.
Helped your sister move.
Took my French club to the airport. Sometimes we sleep in it.
I drove it to the prom.
The kids listen to their music in it.
I can carry the fellas to the golf course.
We took
Sorry, you're out of time.
I didn't get a toy.
Ford Aerostar.
Cal-Can asked top breeders, how would you make the ideal dog food?
I'd have big chunks of meat.
Should have a good meaty smell to it.
No soy, the meat protein, a good balance of vitamins and minerals.
I like it to be firm, come out of the can in a solid chunk.
Introducing new Cal-Can Pedigree, packed with meaty chunks from top to bottom. The best ever Cal-Can.
The Cal-Can Pedigree is a super product.
And the quality is all the way through that can.
They lick the platter clean and they look great. What more can I ask for?
New Cal-Can Pedigree.
The American Express card carries the promise of respect, recognition, unsurpassed personal service wherever you go. But you can't carry the card until you carry one of these home. So apply for membership today.
We got an abdominal GSW in trauma 1. Attention, new mode way in.
OR 7's ready.
Anesthesia?
It's on standby.
Man's paler than a potato. What's his BP?
I think he might...
Spare me the thinking, Kyle. Just get him upstairs on a double. Dr. Meyer, let's get scrubbed and earn us a living. Come on, doctor. This ain't no rehearsal. Welcome back to the fall of 1946. The birth rate was soaring. The post-war baby boom had begun. And from now on, along with their toys and booties and rattles, babies would be treated with more hugging and kissing and common sense than any generation that had gone before, courtesy of Dr. Benjamin Spock. We'll meet Dr. Spock in a few minutes, but before we celebrate the joy of birth, we note the death on October 16th of 11 of the most evil men the world has ever known. In Nuremberg, Germany, in the first war crimes trial in history, the Allies had sentenced 7 Nazi leaders to prison, acquitted 3, and condemned 11 to the hangman.
October 1st, Nuremberg. The 11 Nazis who will be hanged for war crimes and crimes against humanity on the morning of their sentencing. October 15th, the night before the executions. A suicide watch is on to prevent those responsible for taking millions of lives from taking their own lives. And an American reporter is allowed into the cell block for a look at the prisoners. Joseph Kingsbury Smith of the International News Service.
The last one that I looked at was Goering's cell. And when I looked through, his cot was on the left side of the cell, small cell. He was lying halfway against the wall on the cot. He was reading a book. I couldn't tell from the distance what it was about, but I later learned that it was entitled With the Passage Birds to Africa. And it was a sort of a tourist book.
But within the hour, Reichsmarshal Hermann Wilhelm Goering is dead, and nobody seems to know where he got the cyanide. October 16th, just after 1 a.m., the remaining 10 are led across the courtyard to the gallows, where the oldest testament to victory will prevail.
They mounted the 13 forbidding wooden steps of the black scaffold under the glare of bright electric lights. The most excited and enraged man of all was Julius Streicher, the Jew baiter. Just as he was about to mount the steps leading up to the platform on which he was to hang, he shrieked at the top of his voice, "Heil Hitler."
And he was the only one who groaned when they fell through the trap. So later, after it was all over, I got in touch with the GI sergeant who had handled it. And I asked him why Streicher was the only one to groan. And he said, well, it's very simple because I strangled the bastard. He explained by adjusting the noose correctly, if you didn't adjust it correctly and brought it to one side, not at the back of the neck, then the man would strangle to death.
The men who built the Nazi war machine had been punished. Their machines remained. The V-2 rocket. Captured Nazi film showed us the terrible weapon that tore London apart. Finally, the real thing was captured in pieces and was being kept at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. Component parts for 100 V-2 rockets, souvenirs brought home by the U.S. Army. American engineers also understood that with no bomb at the end of it, the V-2 was simply a means of transportation, and with adjustments, a technology that might one day take man to the moon. James Fagan was an engineer, and he was there.
We were participating in one of the two major advances, I guess, of the 20th century. Of course, the one being the atomic energy, and the other one being the field of rocketry.
The news reeled with stories about German rockets, American scientists, and victory over tomorrow. An all-American victory with a little help from their friends, the German scientists, those former enemy aliens that were smuggled into this country in 1945. Like that fellow named Werner von Braun, and a member of his team, Konrad Dannenberg.
Even for the German crew, many of the things we did in White Sands with the V-2 launchings were relatively new. Up to that point, we had to make many guesses as to the upper layers of the atmosphere, what temperatures do we have, what air composition. And now for the very first time, we could actually go up there and measure these things. And in those conditions, of course, we were really now for the first time in outer space.
In a way, they already were, being confined to base in the American desert, except for certain chaperoned field trips for science.
I was for the first time exposed to milkshakes in those days. That was one of the great innovations.
The life that existed out there was a group of men who, for activities, had only 2 or 3 things they could do. They could drink beer, they could walk in the desert, or they could launch V-2s. Well, the atmosphere of the early V-2 firings in White Sands, I think, could best be described by the word chaotic. That was the period before the formal countdown. I mean, there was none of this business of X minus 24 hours. It was, hey, Albert, is such and such ready to go, you know, and then the firing would take place.
And on October 10th, a V-2 rocket armed with a camera rose 102 miles above us and showed us a world without man-made boundaries, but with plenty of room. A cosmic joke to people who wanted rooms, not room. Why couldn't a house go up as fast as a rocket? Ta-da, the prefab house.
Ain't nobody here but us chickens. Ain't nobody here at all.
This is the slow way. What's more, this particular way is different, quite different. Back in 1939, a dozen Philadelphia families had bought 240 acres of countryside and begun a cooperative housing project. They called it Bryn Gwylyd, which is Welsh for Hill of Vision. Their vision was a community that would be based on sharing. After the war, more families joined in, and some got a little luck when it came to building materials.
We were fortunate in having a cousin up in Maine that cut lumber.
Bill Maxfield, an engineer, was already at Bryn Gwylyd and trying to get going.
But we started so early that we couldn't even get windows that we wanted, and I couldn't even finish the drawings of the house until I could find windows that were going to be delivered.
Getting doors and windows was often tougher than hanging on to an idea. Edward Potts had the dream before he had the house.
The original idea was, 1, to live in the country when you couldn't otherwise afford it, and 2, to be mixed with all kinds of different people, interracial, interfaith, and grow up, and bring your kids up knowing other people so that they weren't all prejudiced.
What we're interested in is this cooperation. People that are interested in being on committees. There's a lot of committees work. There's about 20 committees.
Oh, and remember when we made those forms for the septic tank? Somebody built forms that several of us were going to use, and everybody would go pour the concrete for a given house together, and then we moved to somewhere else. Eventually, I think the forms fell apart. I don't know.
The land was owned communally, but the houses were owned individually. The work was done communally, but the children were done individually, so to speak. There was plenty of work, and there were plenty of children. The idea was to attempt to become as self-sufficient as possible. These people had lived through a depression when too many people had plenty of nothing. If they were determined to live in a land of plenty, they were determined to get it from their own land, their own animals. The carrots, however, were not for the rabbits. Some people have begun to think of sharing as dangerous instead of neighborly.
The word seemed to get around from some of them that we were a bunch of free-love communists, or I don't know what all. I mean,
But we knew each other so well, and we did things together, and sometimes one parent would stay at home with the children, and the other one would go to a meeting, and it would be perhaps the man of one family and the woman of another family. That was rather shocking. I think they were concerned.
Community living by a few dozen families was no answer to the acute post-war housing shortage. In October, President Truman declared a housing emergency. In Atlanta, 2,000 people answered an ad for one apartment. Veterans were home from the war and making babies, whether they had a place to live or not. Nearly 3.5 million babies were born in 1946, a 20% jump in the birth rate in 1 year. And the babies had a Pied Piper, a prominent New York pediatrician, Benjamin Spock. While in the Navy, Dr. Spock had written Baby and Child Care, a runaway bestseller in the fall of '46.
The first sentence in the book is, trust yourself, you know more than you think you do. And then it goes on to say, don't be overawed by the experts and don't be intimidated by your relatives. The editor who came to me about writing the book said, it doesn't have to be very good, he said, because at 25 cents a copy, which was what the price was in 1946, we can sell, he said, 10,000 a year. Well, he was thinking of 10,000, and it turned out to be 750,000.
To illustrate his instructions, Spock chose one of the leading baby artists and illustrators of the day, Dorothea Fox, herself the mother of an infant.
Those illustrations that I did for Dr. Spock were the first and only ones that I did without using a pencil, without drawing them carefully first. I just was so full of the idea, the way Dr. Spock had explained it to me, that I just sat down and did them. One of the reasons I did that was because I didn't think it was a very important job. It turns out to be almost the most important thing I did and I've done in my life.
Spock was a hero to Anne Maxfield.
It was our Bible. And if someone else didn't have one and somebody had a particular ailment, then you would go home and look it up in Dr. Spock's book, and then they would get Dr. Spock's book, too. It was really wonderful.
As a pediatrician in practice, I was impressed with how much anxiety there is in the beginning parent. I saw on a few occasions mothers burst into tears as they left the hospital.
Before Spock, many doctors treated babies like little adults and parents like dummies.
When we went to the baby doctor, we got a sheaf of typewritten schedules, the hour, the time that we should do something for our baby. And I didn't do it very well anyway, but I was always a little guilty about not doing it very well, you know, thinking I'm not raising this baby right. Instead of what Dr. Spock says is you have instincts. You know more than you think you do.
For several years, I worried very much whether some parent might not tell me that though I had the best of intentions, I had brought about injury or had even killed their child. And it was one of the comforts as the years went by that nobody accused me of having killed their baby.
And what will they name the baby? By 1946, ethnic favorites such as Rosie and Sarah and Samuel were gone, leaving Susan, Carol, James, and Joseph, and William, usually known as just plain Bill, an ordinary guy. The most common boy name? Robert. The most common girl name? Well, a little inaccuracy right here would save a world of explanation. But little inaccuracies are for amateurs, so I'll try to explain. See, it was my intention to have a bit of good, clean fun with all those clean, white bread names. Who knew the most popular girl name would turn out to be Linda? Linda. Personally, I'd prefer Rosie or Bill. Come back to the autumn of 1946 and give 'em hell, Harry.
Our world will be right back. Period of adjustment. Fall 1946.
Peachy, 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 real needy. Peachy, 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 real needy.
From out of the peach comes Reuniti Natural Peach, bursting with a taste of fresh peaches. Not a watered-down cooler, just natural Reuniti.
Peachy, peachy.
Reuniti Natural Peach. You'll go peaches over it.
Peachy, real needy.
And try apple and raspberry, too.
Aquafresh, case history 43. Jim Edwards, Aquafresh user. Never had a cavity in his life. But at 17, facing new problems, gum disease and bad breath. Recommendation, now more than ever needs a complete toothpaste. Triple protection Aquafresh. It fights cavities with fluoride, freshens breath, and helps remove plaque to reduce early gum disease called gingivitis in one complete toothpaste.
Jim, this is really important.
Aquafresh, more than cavity protection, triple protection.
The fiber in Kellogg's Mini Wheats helps keep me flying right, but it's the delicious frosting that fuels my youthful appetite.
Small problem. The shredded wheat nutrition gives me that drive, but the kid in me loves to tackle the tasty side.
Kellogg's Mini Wheats. Shredded wheat nutrition for the adult in you. Delicious taste for that part of you that'll never grow up.
The fiber in Mini Wheats gives me a great start. When it comes to the great taste, I'm just a kid at heart.
I'll have what she's having.
Kiss, kiss, lemon. You want a moist lemon cake, but have just 7 minutes to bake. A microwave cake is moist, can it be? It's microwave from Pillsbury. Loving from the oven, Pillsbury. We're warm, we're hot, beep, beep, pop, pop. The microwave cake, they'll love a lot. Lemon, lemon, giggle, giggle. Loving from the oven, beep, beep.
Oh, buttermilk sky.
Our world will be right back.
What's the good word tonight? Are you gonna be mellow tonight? Oh, buttermilk sky, can't you see my little donkey and me? We're as happy as a Christmas tree.
Have fun this Sunday on ABC Sports. First, it's good times on the gridiron as the college football season gets underway. It's an intersectional rivalry as the Big Ten powerhouse Iowa Hawkeyes take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Live, Mazda presents the Kickoff Classic. Then, top amateurs swing for glory at the oldest championship in the country. It's the U.S. Amateur Golf Championship. Everybody's having fun Sunday.